I hate to tell you this, but the President of the United States is not for the $15 an hour minimum wage. I know he told you he was. I know he looked you in the face multiple times and said, I am for this particular policy. I want that $15 an hour minimum wage. The working class needs it. I know when he was on the debate stage, he was fighting Trump. He said the exact same thing. As president, he comes out, my economic team, I've just had a conversation with him, and he gets into the $15 an hour minimum wage stuff. And yet, behind the scenes, he is dogging the $15 an hour. I don't think we can get it. I don't think we can get it. Either Joe Biden doesn't have the temperament, doesn't have the political skill or acumen, doesn't have the interest, doesn't have the want, doesn't have the concern, whatever you want to call it. I don't think he has the urgency of the moment that the moment necessarily demands. And that in and of itself is somewhat of a problem. But I think it goes deeper than that, and that Joe Biden just wasn't for it at all. How else do you explain it? The President of the United States has the capacity to get across his agenda. He just doesn't do it. The President of the United States can push to end the filibuster. The President of the United States, again, he's just getting into office. He has all sorts of the magic quality of the president that can be leveraged at his ends, at various, especially people within the context of his own party. And if necessary, the bully pulpit can also be used at the discretion of that president to go after people who are going after or stopping his plan. It doesn't seem that Biden has it in him, and that's kind of the issue. $15 an hour minimum wage was a big goddamn deal. 500,000 Americans dropped dead. I don't think you have the urgency that the moment demands. How many people have been sick? 28 million people was infected? How many medical bills are that for people who don't necessarily have health care? 40 million people ended up without health care during the pandemic itself when people needed that same health care. I guess I'm making the point that he is not acting with the urgency that the moment demands. You told people you were going to give them 2,000. Somewhere along the way, that was transmogrified into 1,400, which was then lessened even still to where you took it out of the hands of 17 million more Americans. That's a fail. That's a loss. You could say that that's a win, but that's a paper win. That's not a real win. From the standpoint of the $15 an hour minimum wage, you have the capacity to say, hey, Kamala, go override the parliamentarian. Get that bill passed. Because you know what would happen in midterms? You would be applauded for it. Joe Biden got us the $15 an hour minimum wage. That's what Joe Biden did. And you also, weirdly enough, because you've taken so long to implement it, what you have hanging over their heads is if you vote Democrats out, they're going to get rid of this particular provision as it goes through. Yeah, that's fucked up. By the same token, if you're a Democrat, that's something that you want because it ups your chances. You don't even have the decency to do that. In this very particular case, though, you have Joe Manchin. The House put the $15 an hour minimum wage in the bill. They put it in the stimulus package. Joe Biden supposedly is for it. Now, despite the fact that I don't think Joe Biden is for it, despite the fact that I think he's been down in it behind the scenes, he doesn't necessarily have it in him either to push it or he didn't necessarily have the concern about it at all. He is going to try to use some excuse of saying, hey, they stopped me from doing it, but I really wanted to do it. It's like I really wanted to close Guantanamo Bay, but they just kept stopping me from doing it. That's going to be the $15 an hour minimum wage thing. Budget reconciliation is going to be the only chance you have to get this through. And since Biden hasn't given any guidance on how he expects to get it through otherwise, I'm still with budget reconciliation is the only chance you have to get this through. Either destroy the filibuster or grow a pair. Get Kamala Harris to override the parliamentarian and get those senators in line. From my standpoint, despite the fact that I don't believe that Joe Biden cares about it, politics is different. If you are any of the Democrats in the House and you're looking for any excuse at all, to not back the COVID plan that they're sending back, the argument that you make is the President of the United States said he was for this. He said it multiple times, and I don't think the president of the United States is a liar. He said you could trust him, you could trust his word. He's not going to lie to the American public. So we don't believe that he's going to lie to the American public right now. You look into the camera. Every time somebody asks you, you say that. On top of that, you make the point that says Joe Manchin is basically kicking food out of the mouths of babies. Babies are going to starve because Joe Manchin has put this bill back another week that we have to discuss this plan now. And we have to put the $15 an hour minimum wage that the president wanted back into this bill in order to send it back because we are going to enforce Joe Biden's agenda. And what you do is you force Joe Biden to declare a side. Is he going to repudiate his previous position, or is he going to back to $15 an hour minimum wage and get those other people who are on the sidelines off the sidelines? What is he going to do? Because he has no other choice, one or the other. And if you are screaming bloody murder that Joe Manchin is kicking baby food out of the mouths of babies because he kicked this plan back and the stimulus is needed, and the president clearly wanted a $15 an hour minimum wage, otherwise he wouldn't have said it so often. You do exactly what Republicans do. They hang that shit around Democrats' neck. When Obama said, I'm going to be bipartisan, I'm going to be above politics, what did they do? They said, all right, fair enough. We're not going to let you be above politics. When Joe Biden said, I'm going to be bipartisan, what did they do? They say, okay, fair enough. Joe Biden is not being bipartisan. I mean, look at the way he's running roughshod over us. I mean, we're trying. It's that. I'm making the point that use the fact, for once, that Joe Biden said it as an excuse to do the goddamn right thing and stand up for Americans. $7.50 minimum wage. That's utterly appalling. And how many ever people are at that level of a minimum wage? What are the people that are 10, 11, 12? And I'm saying this with a mother that ended her career making like $14 an hour. It's a big deal in regards to what it means from the standpoint of people having agency in this particular economy. And if you're so worried about this notion of inflation, well, you can have a wealth tax. You can take some of the heat off the economy by taking that shit from the rich. From the standpoint of the poor and the middle class, they have been under siege. And it wasn't just during COVID. Yes, it was during COVID because that is the aspect of the population that died. It wasn't the people who were of means. It was also before. I keep making this point. 42% of the public living off $18,000 a year or less. Think about what that means. It is monstrous to try to factor a life in those terms. A parking ticket is a disaster. What is Christmas like? What is the school trips like? Look, from the standpoint of whatever is considered the left, if there is anything of the left in Congress that is something separate than the Democratic Party, I would imagine this is the time to say it. This is a forced to vote moment. And this is not like the prior Medicare for All forced to vote, where this has come somewhat of a tactic or something. This is pretty straightforward in regards to the politics. The president said he wanted it. Why would we do anything other than the president said he wanted? Why would we back a bill that the president is clearly against? Because the president said he wanted it, and he said trust him. Yes, you should lean into that heavily. If they are going to bitch, what they're going to bitch at you about is saying, oh my God, these lefties are kicking the food out of the mouths of babies. Because they're trying to get the president to basically make a choice. I'm making the point that that is honestly the argument you should have been using from day one. And the moment they try to take this out in the Senate, you have every bit of a right to put it back in the House, especially since the president of the United States has kept saying he's for it. Every bit is today. Will they do it, though? And honestly, I don't think I've come across anybody that for once believe that they're going to actually stand up and back America on this. And fact of the matter is, Pelosi is right here basically saying they're willing to pass the bill, which means that the $15 an hour thing was always just the decoy. The House was perfectly capable of doing that because they knew that it wasn't going to go anywhere in the Senate. And the moment that it got bounced back, bam, we're going to pass it immediately. It's decoy. It allows their people to vote for something like that and get bona fides. It's like, yes, I voted for $15 an hour minimum wage, knowing full well that it wasn't going to pass. You don't believe me? Here's Pelosi basically saying, when they kick that bill back to us, we're going to pass it. But nobody is talking about the babies that aren't going to be able to eat for an extra several days because Joe Manchin decided he wanted to be spiteful towards the American working class. He doesn't believe that American workers are worth $15 an hour. Joe Manchin doesn't believe American workers are worth $15 an hour. And that's something that the people in West Virginia should pay attention to. Think about the person who we're talking about here. I mean, he's basically arguing and destroying. I am going to hold up the president's agenda because I don't want American workers to get $15 an hour. You know what he did back? Oil and gas. Basically, he wanted, he was back in oil and gas along with John Tester. Let's hear Pelosi.
International Women's Day, the connection between the advancement of women, the recognition of the contributions of women, and the needs that are met in the America Rescue Plan. We'll be having a further discussion about this bill as we move forward to its passage in the next 48 hours. But it's important to acknowledge on International Women's Day the connection between the advancement of women, the recognition of the contributions of women, and the needs that are met in the America Rescue Plan.
You know what would help a lot, Pelosi? Single moms. Single moms actually work. And sometimes when those single moms work, they work at jobs that don't pay a minimum for $15 an hour. And you know what would help those moms? Legislations like this that would force those companies to pay those people a $15 an hour wage. This phony theatrical nonsense of, okay, on International Women's Day, I would like to attach this particular concept with this particular bill. And I'm going to join these two things together to show something or another. I don't know. People could feel whatever they feel about it. I'm Pelosi. But the catch here is, and the important point here is, out of all this posturing and hand waving, we're going to pass this bill in 24 to 48 hours, which means they're basically going to take whatever they got and pass it. This is the moment for people of good conscience to basically not allow them to do that. Meaning, I am not going to support that bill without the $15 an hour minimum wage. And I am not going to do it because Joe Biden doesn't want me to do it. Because Joe Biden has said all along the way that he was for the $15 an hour minimum wage. And yeah, you force Joe Biden to make a choice. Is Joe Biden going to repudiate his previous position, which, again, you should force him to do, by the way, or not? That's the question. And honestly, if they're not willing to do this, meaning the force the vote stuff, you can make the argument, okay, that's a tactic and it's not going to get Medicare for fair enough. But this is direct, it's very specific, and it makes sense from a political standpoint. They revile you under normal circumstances. They're not going to love you any more or less because you do that. They may even respect you a little bit more if you do. But from the standpoint of the American public, $15 an hour, I don't understand why the fuck any of you think the American workers are not worth that. And honestly, should you be put back in office if you don't? This is where I'm at on this. And so from the standpoint of any of these people who are voting against that, all of them should be voted out of office. And again, I didn't vote for Joe Biden because I got to be honest, I didn't necessarily believe Joe Biden was going to do any of the things that he was talking about during the campaign. The Obamacare stuff was being walked back immediately. I'm not going to change anything was sold to the plutocrats of the bunch and the money and interest. So why the hell am I going to vote for somebody if I don't necessarily think, or if I think they're lying to me? And then you see this. But I'm making a point. Whether I thought he was lying to me or not, whether he is lying to the American public or not, is secondary from the fact that you can tear at his credibility and make him make a choice. That is your only play. Otherwise, you are falling into the bunch that for whatever particular reason does not believe the American public is worth $15 an hour. And yeah, I can make that pitch or I can make that point because you do have a tactic that would allow you the maximum position in this particular conversation and negotiation and would stop her and stop Biden from trying to rush through a stimulus bill that doesn't contain one of the president's priorities and one of the reasons that the American public voted for him in the first place. Yeah, it's bullshit if they're going to do this. And yeah, you should not go along with it if indeed you call yourselves somewhere on the left. Like, share.